Welcome to Swim, education for coaches, athletes, and parents, the only podcast dedicated to club swimming. You have selected the athlete advice section for episode 21, which is this week. We drop a full episode every Thursday and the athlete advice section every Saturday. If you're more interested in this topic, go to the full version at YouTube or wherever you find your podcast. So let's dive in. Move up in age, and we're going to take it from an age point of view and develop physically, mentally, emotionally, etc. What are the skills that they need to learn and value and conquer in order to be the best swimmer they can whenever they get to, if they want to, into the senior level or elite level higher up? And so that's kind of what we're going to look at. And I want to start it off by just kind of giving an overall framework that we're going to work from that people can look up. So Canada Sportif, as they say, because it's French Canadian as well. They came up, their Olympic committee came up with a framework, which is the long-term athlete development plan. And you can find this free online, which is great. And they basically start off from little kids, like zero,
Right.
age zero, all the way up to master's level. What are the different periods of growth, and what should parents and everybody be doing during those times? So if we're talking about learn fundamentals, 6 to 9 years old, what are some of the skills that you really emphasize in your program that swimmers need to know if they want to be the best they can be?
When I have built my programs, it's been based upon what I've seen great, age group coaches do. And, really that like 6 to 9 group, the number one thing that we always start with is something so simple as streamlines. We always start with push-offs and just teaching them how to push off and streamline correctly. It's like a lot of times we'll use hula hoops that, they have to push off and go through the hula hoop. And, or we get fun noodles and we'll put them in a circle. So it's a smaller circle that they have to go through. Or even, under the legs that, you get everybody to line up and then the swimmer has to streamline underneath everybody's legs and come up.
Right.
So again, it goes back to that game, atmosphere that they don't really realize that they're learning, but they're learning.
Right.
So I always start with, streamlines. From there, obviously, this is something that we didn't deal with a long time ago, but dolphin kicks. If you teach them at a very young age how to dolphin kick from the moment that they get in that pool, it sets them up on a trajectory that in swimming we need now. It's our fifth stroke. It's important. So with the streamline comes the dolphin kicks. I would transition from that we normally start with freestyle. The majority of their life, they will be swimming freestyle more than any other stroke.
Yes.
And that is just the way that practices are. That's the way that it is. And so having a proper, great freestyle base is insanely important. What about you?
Well, I mean, I think like you talked about how like for the first couple months, we want to work on streamlines, we want to work on freestyle. I mean, I think for this age group, because it has to be so repetitive, you work on it the entire time.
Yeah.
And the framework that we talks about with this basic fundamental movement. So streamlines, pushing off the wall, freestyle, backstroke, kicking on a kickboard, kicking without a kickboard, I think is more important to help them learn how to do that. And I think that if you really do a huge amount of kicking, that's really going to translate into better swimming long term. Well, why is that? Because we know that, at least the way that I teach swimming, is you start with level, then you work with your legs, and then you work with your levers, which is your arms. So basic balancing drills that you can do with your swimmers at this age is really going to set them up long term. Because
and I always recommend, I think, pull boys. I've had a lot of coaches that are like, oh, that age group, don't use pull boys with them. But it's exactly what you said. I mean, pull boys make it to where they got to feel when they're off, and they love pull boys. Like, they're a flotation device. It's very entertaining for them.
And the other thing that's really important for coaches to remember is that there's a difference between knowing what to do and physically being able to do it.
Yes.
right? And that can really be day to day.
Yep.
That can be moment to moment with this age group.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think that so many times there's coaches really get lost in trying to structure their team as a whole instead of like what we're talking about, that it's just you have to individually take those age groups and where they're at mentally and do what you know is best for that age group. But I'm going to kind of progress it a little bit farther that, free and back are always kind of the beginning of it. And really, we don't approach breaststroke, which would be the next one to me. We don't approach breaststroke until really after Christmas time. If, depending upon the group that you have, they're ready.
Right.
Because breaststroke and butterfly are very unnatural strokes. It's always, I feel like your progression always has to kind of be see the kids that you've got in that group and where they're actually at, and don't rush into all four strokes immediately.
Right.
Especially because with meets, a lot of times I find parents will, want them in every single event. And,
Right. Because they're there. They might as well swim
right,
everything.
because they're there and they're like, well, I don't want them to just swim two events. Let's swim everything. And there are some kids that like they're fine with it. And, even though they know their butterflies illegal, they still want to do it and
Right.
know they're going to get DQ'd, and the parents are fine with it. I don't think there's really a reason to stop them from doing that. The only reason to stop them from doing that is if like it takes them 10 minutes to swim a 25 butterfly. Then yes, by all means, do
Yeah,
not
back it up.
Yeah.
So, you have to teach them a flip turn. You got to teach them an open turn. And one thing that I've learned is like with the open turn, it's so technical because
Yeah.
it's touch with two hands, throw the elbow back, answer the phone, push off the wall, and they're trying to do too many things. I found that if you're going to criticize me for this because it's deadly, and I understand it's deadly, but I teach them freestyle open turns with one hand.
Yeah.
Okay. And so they'll come in freestyle, they'll reach with their dominant hand, and their elbow's already back. So they don't have to worry about this motion. So now they can just come back and get the push off the wall, and they get it instantly. It's crazy how fast they get it. But if you only do it with freestyle, then you don't run the risk of breaststroke and butterfly being a one-handed turn.
Yeah.
And if they can't do a flip turn, then you're teaching them a very fast turn fundamentally that's going to help them later on.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've heard the criticism from, or critique from friends that are coaches that are like, I'm afraid they're going to do one-handed touches on their breaststroke and butterfly. I'm like, if you never let them do that with breaststroke and butterfly, they'll register where it needs to be.
Right.
But it's one of those tricks of the trade that I think is really good, is freestyle one-handed open turns. When do you start letting them read the clock?
So at my pool, we have digital clock.
Right.
So we always start out with the circular just to physically show them how exactly how teachers do it, that 15s and then 10s and then 5s, and subtracting that way. But we don't do intervals until they are 9, 10, 11, 12 years old.
Right.
We just start teaching them. And the way we start teaching them is saying, okay, you're going to do 10 25s and you're going to rest 10 seconds in between. Watch the clock.
Right.
You need to watch the clock for 10 seconds. So that's really the introductory part of it. With little kids, I think it's just little baby steps. But really, my advice to coaches is the way that kids are learning in school is constantly changing. And something like reading a clock is math. And if you don't understand how they're being taught in school, it's going to be really hard for you to teach them, how to do this if they're being taught some other way to subtract something. And it's crazy that us as coaches are having, that we got to think that way, but that's just the way, education has developed. So I think just make sure and ask some parents, or even ask some kids, hey, how did you learn how to read a clock? How did they teach you this? Because generation to generation, I think it does change a lot.
All right. So we have Learn to Train, which is the 9 to 12 for the males and 9 to 11 for the females. Again, it's still going to be fundamentals that you're teaching here. So you're refining, but what other, so this is where you start definitely breaststroke's already in,
Yep.
Butterfly, because of strength, I think starts here.
Yep.
Yes, they can do it, and yes, they learn the skill, but being able to train it a little bit and being able to allow them to have that as part of their sets. And it comes down to the individual, right? You
Yeah.
might have a group of swimmers that can really do butterfly well, let them train it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But it's as a group, this is where they should be able to do all 4 strokes. They should be able to do open turns and flip turns. Definitely backstroke flip turns toward the end of the fundamental stages should definitely be there. And learning how to, count the strokes from the flags in is always fun and adventuresome. Backstroke starts instead of just falling in, learning the technique that goes along with it. Obviously, they're reading the clock. Obviously, you get the back to breast turn. I'm still open turning at this point. I'm not
Yes.
doing anything crazy there.
Yeah.
What other fundamentals do we need to add in?
I think that you really start developing their knowledge of drills.
Yes. Okay, great.
This is where you start introducing your kind of club-wide basic drills. It is so important to me that kids understand what the purpose of a drill is, and
Right.
constantly reminding them, we do this drill for reason A and B.
Right.
Here's what you should be feeling. Here's how you should be doing it.
So they can self-correct.
Yes.
Because later on, as they get more advanced, you can say, they can say to you, I don't feel good about this. Well, what drill would you use?
Yeah.
Let's try this drill. Let's try this drill. And so they can start trying to fix it when they're given a choice of drill during a warm up or something along those lines to kind of know more about the stroke. I think this is also where you start getting the feel versus real. You kind of reference that. You feel this is what the real technique is.
Yep.
So let's try to feel this so that you can look like this. So you're trying to teach that together. Otherwise, there's going to be conflict. This is the first step where you can start bringing in speed and train a little bit of speed. So we're not doing all the energy systems. Maybe toward 11, if they're more advanced, you can start doing that. But their body's going to have either endurance or sprint. They're going to have some speed work. And you can start working that in at this age group, but don't expect it to be training it a ton. Because mix it up, let them have fun, let them race. They want to do that. And you can train that a little bit, but it's not going to be the same level as the next level that we go up to. So you have that. And I think this is where drylands can start coming in. But you have to be really particular about what you're training, because without the induction of hormones, hypertrophy, which is gaining strength to get stronger, isn't going to occur. They're going to, they can get a little bit with sport specific movements, but they're not going to get a ton out of it until they hit puberty.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, flexibility, some yoga, some playing of games, medicine balls, maybe some TRX bands, something along those lines, just a little bit where they can really kind of do super loose with their weights, or they can adjust very easily, is where you would want to be with that. But that starts now with the basic fundamental movements of what they're going to train later if they continue with the program.
Yeah, correct. And I think, the big thing that you said in there, I've always believed in this age group, dryland should be more fun and games than it should be anything else. And, whether it's, Frisbee, whatever, kickball, things like that, that's more important than push-ups and sit-ups and crunches. And it's not that they can't do those things occasionally, but more just, giving them different movements that we know is going to be athletic outside of the pool.
Yes.
But not some strict dryland program or a bunch of push-ups, a bunch of sit-ups, things like that, because number one, they dread dryland as they get older.
Right.
But number two, they also feel more obligated when they're at home to do those things when they're at a young age, when they really shouldn't be. They should be going out and climbing a tree.
Right.
And I mean, again, there's tons of studies you can look at this age that your kids actually develop more muscles going out and playing with their friends in the yard, climbing a tree, than they do if you go and get some professional, trainers that's going to do dryland with them.
Okay, so train to train, that's 12 to 16 for the males and 11 to 15 for the females. And this is where you're at full-blown practices. It's year-round. They're choosing that this is their sport. Now, if they're a high school only swimmer, then it's only for part of the year. But this is where you can train all the energy systems. This is where all the skills need to be there. And if not, you're pulling them aside and working with them individually so that they can get better at the skills. This is also where I think, tragically, in some cases, people get locked into certain events and they say, I'm a breaststroker and this is what I'm going to do. Now, that might be true, but
Yeah.
I've always had the idea of we teach an IM program. So
Yeah.
you have to learn all the strokes. You have to train all the strokes, because at least for muscle development, it's going to give you all the different angles of the muscle so that you're stronger long term.
Right.
But I mean, this is where you can start saying, okay, I like sprinting a little bit more than distance, or distance a little bit more than sprint. Yeah, I'm still going to do the other events every once in a while, but I'm starting to hone in. I'm starting to become, if not, I'm a high-end age group swimmer, I'm a low-end senior swimmer, and I'm working toward, now you might be very advanced, and so you are a senior swimmer. But
Right.
this is where the full package, that if you've done the work and they've learned the skills through your program, they have all the skill sets they need so they can really focus on training now. And
Yeah.
that should be, this is where training becomes the focus. Dry land becomes part of the program, and it needs to be official dry land, getting into weights depending on the individual and how mature they are physiologically. And this is where you have a full-blown program and you're really saying, all right, I'm specializing now. I'm putting in the effort. I do swimming in school. I do swimming, maybe one more sport in school, and I'm really going to focus in and be the best that I can be.
Mm-hmm. And, I definitely think too, this is where you really see the maturity change. This is a very tricky group
Yes.
athletically, because, puberty hits at such different times with different kids. So it can be really tricky. I'll give my experience with boys, especially. I always feel like girls, it's really rare that you've got extreme cases, but boys seem to be
Yes.
very all over the place, that you could have a 15-year-old who still has not hit puberty and doesn't have muscle development, is still short, struggles mentally with it because their peers look like full-blown men. We just want to make sure, progression wise, that they're not going into the group that the standards are something that they can't meet yet. It
Right.
doesn't mean that they couldn't eventually meet it. And you're comparing apples and oranges. So I always think this is the toughest group, because you've really got to compartmentalize their progression and their success. And if you do it based solely upon age and not their physical development, you really can run into a lot of problems.
Right.
Because they want to be with their peers. They want to, have that socialization factor. But when you start in on all of these different energy systems, it'll become very apparent very quick. You really got to separate groups now based upon, where they're at developmentally rather than an age, because you really can turn kids off. They can really walk away from the sport and get discouraged quickly.
With the learn to train, you need to start teaching about psychological skills, because for the first time, just because they got taller and stronger, they dropped time. Now they're not going to be dropping time as easily. This is where people start talking about plateaus, when plateaus don't have to necessarily be part of the swimming experience.
Yeah.
And so I think that we already taught them the fundamental skills. They have those down. Now we're training, and now we're training not just the physical, but also the psychological.
Mm-hmm. And I think from a coaching perspective at this age, is number one reminder is don't lose the technique side of it. I find a lot of coaches at this age group want to go, full all out hardcore everything, and they feel like there's no time anymore that they should be doing technique. But the reality of it is that it's probably more important than ever, because these swimmers' bodies are changing on a daily basis. So if you're not, once a practice, doing some kind of drills for them to be able to feel the development of their body and how things are changing, you're going to look down the road in 2 or 3 years and there's going to be some real bad habits. And, I want to hit on too what you said about the emotional and mental part of this is, This is probably, to me, I would have to say, the hardest age group to coach.
Right.
And the reason I say that is their actual emotions are changing so much
Right.
that you get a lot of tears, you get a lot of anger, you get a lot of bad days, and they just sometimes don't know how to deal with them. So you've got to have a lot of patience to be able to help them work through that stuff.
So, I just think that it gets tricky. And I think that is if you plan the entire program on a progression of these are the skills at these ages that I want the age group coaches to be teaching, so that when they get to the senior swimmers, that they're prepared. And now we can really start talking about race strategy and true dry land and building the entire program and what's happening physiologically and what's happening psychologically, so we can hit all those different areas. That's built on the back of knowing what the progression is, knowing the progression of drills as they come up, knowing the progression of skills as they come up,
Yeah.
knowing when we teach what, I think is really important. What advice would you give to athletes as they progress through a program?
I would say across the board, it is slow down to correct the important things. When a
Yes.
coach tells you something is important, to fix it, no matter what it is.
Right.
Do not think that you are gaining something by going 900 miles an hour doing bad technique or
Right.
doing a bad turn or doing a bad start, because eventually that will catch up to you.
Yes.
So slow down, learn the things that you need to. If you need to go in the back of a lane to fix something and figure it out, do it. Because in the long run, it is going to progress you so much farther than continually wanting to lead a lane or be the fastest, because that fastest will eventually go from here to here to here because somebody's got better technique than you. So
And that's-
listen to those coaches and slow down and fix it. Even if you are a senior level swimmer, if there is something that a coach sees and they're telling you to change it, do it. If you are 6 years old and a coach is telling you to squeeze your ears with your hands, you try and slow down to do it until you figure it out.
Yeah.
Take the time to do it.
And that's easier said than done.
Oh yeah.
Because we wrap our identity around, I'm the leader of the lane. That's
Yep.
who I am. Now, if I have to go to the back of the lane, now I'm depressed.
Yeah.
There's a funny story. My mom always brings it up, even today. But anyway, she brings this up. She goes, remember whenever they were going to ruin you as a swimmer? I'm like, yes, I do. I came home and I was a breaststroker that was just high repetition. The tempo was really, really high, which is now the thing to do. So I was ahead of the curve is what I want to say. But they slowed me down. They're like, you need bigger strokes. You need to glide more. I tell my swimmers the exact same thing because it's true. And I came in, I got in the car. She was like, how practice? Slammed the door. I'm like, they're trying to ruin me. They're like, what do you do? They're slowing me down. They're putting me in the back. I can't go super rapid. And then as soon as I did it, I started dropping. They knew what they were talking about.
Right.
So trust your coaches, give it a
Yes.
chance, but it's easier said than done. And that's going to be the struggle. And as a swimmer, we can say, don't get wrapped up in your identity. Don't get wrapped up in you do this so well. It's all changed, but maybe think about yourself as an individual that's part of a group. And then
Yeah.
maybe I'm learning something at a different pace. I would say to the youngest swimmers, have fun.
Yes.
If it's not fun, make it fun. Challenge yourself. Tell your coach, this is no fun. Now they might say, well, it's not supposed to be fun. And there are sets that are not supposed to be fun. They're supposed to work, but you should find joy in what you're doing
Yes.
and try to find that. And if you're not, talk to your coach about it. I'm losing my joy. What can I do to find it again? And don't be afraid to do that. Talk to your parents about how do I address this with my coach, because it needs to be fun. And I think that if you're doing that and you trust the system and allow yourself the grace to maybe not be the fastest all the time, but maybe, know that it's going to happen in time, I think you'll be better off.
Definitely.
Talk to you next time.
All right. Bye.
Whatever platform you're listening to, make sure you subscribe and hit the like button. And if you loved us, leave a review. Also, if you're interested in getting more information from this episode, click the link in the description and we'll send you notes from this episode. Finally, do you have a topic to suggest or want to share your thoughts? Email us at swimedinfo@gmail.com. swimedinfo@gmail.com.
Join us next time for a thoughtful discussion about swimming and how coaches, athletes, and parents can improve their performances. Thanks for listening to Swimmed, education for coaches, athletes, and parents.
Thanks. I will talk to you next time.
All right, bye.
Whatever platform you're listening to, make sure you subscribe and hit the like button. And if you loved us, leave a review. Also, if you're interested in getting more information from this episode, click the link in the description and we'll send you notes from this episode. Finally, do you have a topic to suggest or want to share your thoughts? Email us at swimedinfo@gmail.com. swimedinfo@gmail.com.
Join us next time for a thoughtful discussion about swimming and how coaches, athletes, and parents can improve their performances. Thanks for listening to Swimmed, education for coaches, athletes, and parents.